He looked dead, but he wasn't. At the edge of the Grand Canyon, where the rocks fall away into endless silence, a family stopped at the overlook to take in the view. Tourists moved lazily, snapping pictures, sipping from water bottles, laughing over the wind. Then a boy froze. "Dad," he said, pulling on his father's sleeve. "Something's over." It moved. At first, everyone assumed it was a plastic bag caught between the boulders, but the boy didn't look away. He stepped closer past his sneakers, crunching on the gravel. He crouched down and leaned in. "It's an animal," he whispered. Others came over. A few gasped. Between the sun-bleached stones and brittle brush lay a tiny creature, motionless, dust-covered, barely breathing. A bobcat kitten, no more than 6 weeks old. His body was twisted, one front leg bent unnaturally beneath him. His fur was caked with dirt and blood. His eyes were closed and his ribs showed with every weak breath. Someone pulled out a phone. Another shouted for help. But the rangers who arrived a few minutes later only shook their heads. "This is a wild area," one of them said. "We don't interfere with natural events. It's part of the ecosystem." The father, a quiet man with sunburned skin and military tattoos, didn't say a word at first. He just looked down at the kitten. Then he turned to the ranger. "If this were your dog," he said, "would you let it die here?" There was silence. He took off his jacket, gently wrapped the kitten inside it, and placed the bundle in an empty cardboard box someone had found in the trunk. The ranger didn't stop him. No one did. The father and his son rushed to the car. The boy cradled the box in his lap the entire ride. The kitten didn't move, not once. But every few minutes, the boy whispered something to him. Something soft. Something only the dying, or maybe the brave, could hear. The road out of the canyon twisted and dropped, then opened into a long stretch of empty desert. The sun hung low. Time was running out. The boy looked down. Still no movement, no sound, no sign of life, but he refused to let go. The boy was crying now. Not loud, but steady. The kind of crying that comes when you're trying to hold it in and failing. His chin trembled as he stared into the box on his lap. The kitten still hadn't moved. The father drove fast, one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the phone on speaker. "We're bringing in a bobcat kitten," he told the receptionist. "Bad shape found near the south rim. Might not make it." "How far out are you?" 20 minutes. "We'll be ready." Flagstaff, Arizona. They pulled into the lot just before sunset. The doors of the clinic flew open before they'd even stopped. A vet rushed out, and the boy stood still, arms wrapped tightly around the cardboard box. "He's not moving," he whispered. "It's okay," she said, kneeling. "We've got him now." Inside, the team worked fast. They laid the kitten on a heated table. He was limp, cold to the touch. A vet checked vitals. Another clipped a pulse oximeter to his paw. The screen flickered, barely registering. 4 lines were prepped. Warm fluid started. They took X-rays. The images weren't good. Front leg is fractured in multiple places. The lead vet murmured. "He's severely dehydrated. Core temperature is dangerously low and there's possible internal bleeding, abdominal bruising." The father stood. Nearby, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The vet turned to him. I have to be honest, she said. There's not much chance he survives. Maybe 10%, if that. The boy looked up at her, eyes glassy and red. So, what do we do? The father asked. He hesitated. One option is humane. Euthanasia. He's suffering the odds. No. The boy said quietly. The father looked at her again. Give him one night, please. She nodded. Well, try. They placed the kitten inside a soft-sided incubator wrapped in thermal blankets. Heart monitor beeped softly in the background, irregular, slow. A small catheter delivered fluids. They added antibiotics, mild pain meds, glucose. There wasn't much more they could do. Nurse wrote a name on the clipboard. Shadow. It was unofficial, but it stuck. Outside, the clinic lights dimmed. The boy curled up in a chair with a blanket, still watching the treatment room through the glass. Hours passed. Midnight, Shadow was still. At 2:00 a.m., his heartbeat slowed. His breath shallowed even more. A nurse stepped in to check on him, adjusted the and gently brushed dust from his fur. Silence. Then at 3:27 a.m., as the vet leaned down with her stethoscope, Shadow blinked. By morning, something had changed. Shadow stirred slowly, like something ancient waking from a deep sleep. His head lifted an inch off the blanket, trembling with effort. His eyes blinked against the light. He tried to move, his paws twitching. But the moment he pushed himself up, his body collapsed, too weak, too broken. Phil. He was breathing deeper now. A vet stood at the edge of the room, watching in silence. Then another joined her. Neither spoke. They hadn't expected to see him alive. One of the nurses walked in with fresh bandages and stopped short. He's awake. They approached quietly. His ears flicked. His eyes tracked them. Barely, but enough to know he was there. Not just surviving, but aware. The name on his chart had already been written the night before. Shadow. It fit him. He had arrived like a whisper, quiet, almost invisible. Presence you had to look closely to even feel. They began new tests. Another round of scans. X-rays confirmed what they already suspected. His front leg was shattered in 3 places. The fracture was complex, close to the growth plates. It would need a specialized orthopedic procedure if he was ever going to walk or hunt again. And time wasn't on their side. The operation was long, delicate, and expensive. The clinic didn't have the budget. Shadow wasn't a domestic pet. He was wildlife. No owner, no funding, and the resources they did have were already stretched thin. They cleaned his wounds, changed his one of the techs held his tiny paw while the others worked. He didn't resist. He just watched, blinking. Slowly, his breathing steady, but shallow. The lead vet made a call, then another, then 5 more. Local rescue organizations, wildlife funds, emergency aid programs. She wrote emails, attached the scans, explained the urgency. They posted to private networks and vet group forums. Someone started drafting a story to send to the local paper. In the background, Shadow lay still. He didn't know his future depended on strangers who hadn't answered yet. He didn't know his life was waiting in the space between ringing phones and silent inboxes. Outside, the Arizona sun climbed higher. The canyon waited, silent and ancient, as if holding its breath for a decision. Inside, the phone stayed quiet, but no one was calling back. The next day, Shadow's body began to slip backward. His temperature, which had barely climbed into a survivable range the night before, started to fall again. Despite the warming blankets and heat lamps, his paws were cold. His breathing grew shallow once more, and the numbers on the monitor slowed. The 4 kept dripping. The fluid line stayed steady, but Shadow didn't respond. He refused food. The syringe with formula was brought to his mouth. No reaction. He didn't even flinch when touched. By midday, his belly had swollen slightly. Subtle, but alarming. They ran tests. Infection, internal, aggressive. Antibiotics were started the night before, but they weren't working. His system was too fragile. His immunity nearly gone. A second round was introduced. Nothing changed. The staff rotated shifts sitting with him. One nurse wrapped him in her arms, pressed his tiny chest against her scrubs just to keep him warm. Another gently stroked the uninjured side of his face with a fingertip. He didn't purr, didn't pull away, but he stayed present, his eyes open, watching, waiting. No new calls had come. In the afternoon, the front door opened quietly. The same boy stepped in, clutching a sheet of paper in both hands. His father followed behind him. The nurse at the front desk stood surprised. "He's still with us," she said gently, "but it's been a hard day." The boy nodded and walked straight toward the treatment room's viewing window. Through the glass, he saw a shadow curled on a blanket hooked to machines, not moving. He stood there silently. Then slowly he unfolded the paper and taped it to the glass. Child's drawing, crayon lines, a small spotted kitten standing tall against a red canyon wall. Above it in crooked, careful handwriting, "Don't give up." Minutes passed. The boy didn't move. Inside the room, Shadow blinked. His gaze drifted toward the window. He looked at the drawing at the boy. His pupils widened and then barely. His nose twitched. A tech walked in with the feeding syringe. Shadow didn't resist this time. He opened his mouth just enough. The formula touched his tongue. He swallowed slowly. One more drop, then another. It wasn't much, not even enough to log on the chart. But it was the first voluntary action he'd taken in almost 36 hours. The nurse whispered it like a prayer. "He's trying."